Hello and welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. Sorry we are starting a few minutes late. We made some changes because it turns out we have a snow day today here in Minnesota. We've also obviously had a change. This was going to be Alex's favorite episodes, but due to Alex writing a really interesting piece that will be out in Minnesota newspapers soon that we will make available to you all, Alex was not able to join us. Again, snow-related stuff. Erin is wearing something for a band that I believe was started before she was born, but then given how much I've been repping the Bob Dylan movie, because I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan, I suppose I can't speak on that. Either way, though, we are here, and we're going to begin the episode in just a moment. And a quick check-in from your side, Erin?
No, just it's a Slipknot tee that I got at Goodwill, and it's my PJs. It's a snow day, so I didn't get dressed.
There you go. There you go. All right. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast. Friends, we're starting our rewatch of the Clone Wars, where we're not going to go episode by episode, but because we're going to continue the conversation that we've really been the focus of this podcast of not trying to do episode reviews. We already did that a couple of years ago with Riki and Sarah Hayashi. Some wonderful episodes. Really suggest you check back in on. But really, this whole journey has been about me, Erin, and Alex all sharing our own perspectives on Star Wars and learning from each other across the various generations and entry points into Star Wars that we represent, and hoping you fans get to have a similar experience and join in with us in the comments, which you definitely have been doing. And so what we're going to do is for each season of the Clone Wars, we're going to ask each of the three of us to pick our favorite episodes or an arc we really love to talk about or something like that. And to the great surprise of all, the person who cosplays Ahsoka and Twi'leks has chosen the Ryloth arc, in which Ahsoka and Twi'leks feature quite prominently. So, Erin, welcome. And have I basically captured why you chose these episodes? Or tell us more about why 19, 20, and 21, the Ryloth arc, were the ones you wanted to talk about.
So for me, it's episode 20. Like, episode 20 means so much to me. It's called Innocence on Ryloth, and it was one of my favorites growing up, and I never really placed why. But I think it's just another story where we get to see a really young girl kind of fight through a language barrier to communicate with these soldiers, these men that she's afraid of at first, in a way that actually helps free her entire village. So I just always loved that. And I love the clones so much. And growing up, like, they were definitely a brother figure to me. And so seeing them interact in like an older brother way, even though Boyle is wildly uncomfortable with it, always just like really resonated with me.
Definitely.
And there's good lessons and good content from the other two episodes as well.
Yeah. So let me give a quick summary of the three episodes for those who either haven't seen them before, in which case, what are you doing with your life? Forget about jobs, forget about relationships, forget about sleep. Just go watch 7 episodes, 7 seasons of the Clone Wars. It'll only take you like maybe 168 hours total. You can enough caffeine, you can get through it. Or make better life choices, but still watch the show eventually. Or more importantly, those who probably have seen them but just forgot because it's probably been a couple of years. The show's been out for a while. This is a 3-part episode. This is a 3-episode arc about the attempt to win back the planet of Ryloth from the Separatists. The planet of Ryloth is the home planet of the Twi'leks, and we get 3 parts to this battle. And the first part is a battle in space, which is mostly about, and this is kind of why originally I thought these were going to be the episodes you chose, but I definitely hear what you're saying about why 20 hit so hard. Obviously, this is fairly early in the war. The episodes are not in chronological order, by the way, in the shows. That's an interesting point. But these are set fairly early in the war, and for the first time, Ahsoka is being given command. And in one of the first battles, she leads a squadron of fighters, and she basically pulls a Poe Dameron. She gets very focused on her goal. Both Admiral Yularen and Anakin are saying, "We are in a trap. You need to come back." She doesn't come back at first, and she winds up getting most of her all of her squadron killed, and then also a whole ship is destroyed. It's not entirely her fault by any means, but definitely some of it is her fault because they couldn't escape until she was back, etc. She has a big sad about it. She and Anakin talk about it, and Anakin decides that I used to think that throwing someone into the deep end means throwing them into the deep end. Anakin thinks it actually means throw everyone else into the deep end and say, Ahsoka, you've got to go rescue them. So there's this big space battle. Ahsoka has to learn a lot of lessons. Anakin has an interesting style of being a Padawan, and we go forward with our lives having won that battle. Second episode is the beginnings of the ground battle on Ryloth, and a little bit is about some of these other issues of can the various factions on Ryloth work together, including like the one section run by what's his first name? Syndulla's?
Cham Syndulla, but that's in the third episode. That's
Oh,
not
sorry.
in...
Okay, forget that. So mostly it's just about these two clones, Waxer and Boyle, who get cut off from their main group and wind up finding this young Twi'lek girl, and she helps they help her get to safety despite some early, fights and like, should this happen, should this not? Once again, proving that clone armor is able to sustain exactly what the plot needs it to, because sometimes it can block blaster bullets, but when a little girl bites through the glove of clone armor, he can feel it quite badly. So, clone armor does what plot needs it to do. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But they have a fun adventure getting her to safety. And then the third episode is mostly about the battle to take back the capital of Ryloth. And in this, as I was saying, I thought it happened in the last episode, but you're right, it's in this one. We get that there's kind of two groups of Twi'leks who are competing with each other. One is led by Cham Syndulla. If that last name sounds familiar to you, yes, he is the father of Hera Syndulla, which is a great connection that comes up later in the show Rebels. And he's a local rebel leader who at first is very distrustful of the Republic for very understandable reasons. And then there's another group led by Senator Tau, who is the senator from Ryloth to the Republic. And it's this interesting idea of like, okay, maybe some planets they're captured by the Separatists. Maybe some parts of them aren't wild about signing up with the Republic instead of the Separatists. And there's a conflict between those two. They're able to make it work. Meanwhile, Mace Windu commits massive war crimes against droids, and eventually everyone wins the battle and everyone's happy. Did I capture all the major plot points of these 3 episodes?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. So let's talk about the first one. How do we feel about Padawan Poe? Ahsoka Darren.
Ahsoka Darren.
No,
Dameron.
What's Poe's last name?
Dameron.
Dameron, thank you.
I always thought this part was kind of interesting because this is something we see Anakin do later in the series.
Yeah.
Directly. And Ahsoka's on the other side of it. And Anakin's going, we can make it through. We can make it through. And she goes, Master, you can make it through. They cannot. And he loses his whole squadron, basically.
Yeah.
So that's just like a little bit of interesting restitution that he didn't learn from the lesson she learned.
And clearly, like, Ahsoka says quite directly to Anakin, like, I learned it by watching you, Dad. If you think about the old drug commercials. Like, she says, like, you do this all the time. That I'm following what you've taught me.
Yeah, he says to her, first rule of war, follow and obey your superiors. And she says, but sometimes you get carried away. And he said, all that means is that I understand what you're going through. That's just bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit from Anakin, but okay. Follow orders.
It's very much and part of it, I do think this is a good plot point for Anakin, because I think it helps set up his feelings of like, I am different. I can get away with this, but no one else can.
Yeah.
As a clone lover, like, for me, I realize part of it bothers me because it feels like this is Ahsoka learns a lesson, and it's a hard lesson and it's painful, but she grows from it, and that's how we get better. But the lesson she learns is that she directly disobeys orders and gets a lot of people killed, a lot of clones killed specifically.
Yeah.
And like, it kind of bothered me that is so quickly overseen as like, oh, she just made a mistake. It's fine. Instead of like, yeah, no, that would get a lot of people into the brig. Like, like chain of command means something.
Yeah, that's true. I think it just kind of goes to show how the Jedi are not commanders.
Yeah.
And are not meant to be in this position. Yeah. And the war is so desperate that you have to overlook these mistakes because who the hell else is going to be in charge?
Right.
And Yeah, it's very interesting because it's clear how hard it hits Ahsoka. And I mean, it hits me in the audience very hard that
Yeah.
she lost her troopers and her fellow pilots. But that never really bothered me
Mm-hmm.
because that's just the entire show.
Yeah.
And that's how the show portrayed war to be to me as a kid.
Right.
Of like, yeah, you lose all these people, that sucks ass, the battle's not over.
Yeah.
So you got to rally. You got to figure it out.
Well,
And she does, reluctantly.
Mhm. And I think I feel similarly, and I'm wondering if for both of us, it's because in part for me, it's because of those Republic Commando books that we keep talking about, where one of the things that those books go into that the Disney canon hasn't really touched on much because it's real dark, but I think is important, is that while yes, Order 66 has a lot to do with chip in the brains of these clones, that the fact that the clones have seen a lot of their brothers die so that Jedi can learn important moral lessons is probably a part of why the clones are kind of willing to believe that Jedi are not actually on their side or something like that. Because, like, yes, I think everything you just said is true, but the way that they handle it of Anakin then saying, "Okay, Ahsoka, now not only are you the same Padawan who made the mistake before, but now you're doubting yourself. Well, guess what? I'm giving you command again of a much bigger situation. You've got to figure it was." Or if books like Republic Commandos were like, yes, of course it was intentional because look how we're going to shift it. But like, to me, it definitely makes the point of the Jedi have no idea what they're doing. And of course the clones are not happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I did find that very interesting how, like, I mean, there's this one little scene where a clone is like, man, I really wish like General Skywalker were here. And then Rex kind of gives him a dirty look, and Ahsoka's like, but it's like, he's right though.
Yeah.
Like, you need like someone who's actually, I mean, well, also Anakin is not the right person to look to. It's not like he's very well versed in war strategy and shit like that. Right. Who you should be looking to, Admiral Yularen, for sure. Yeah. He knows what's up. And I think it's very subtle, but I feel like Yularen very much kind of backs Ahsoka and like supports her in a way that gets the men to be more on board with it.
Yeah.
And I do genuinely think that if her plan was absolute crap, that Yularen would have said something about it.
Yeah.
Like, I doubt he would let his men and himself just be fucking killed for a 12-year-old girl's like opinions.
For sure.
But yeah, that episode's always interesting because I remember like not really giving a shit about it. I think I even mentioned it sometime in the last couple of weeks. We did an episode and I was like, fuck space battles, storm over Ryloth sucks.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then I rewatched it and I was like, okay, no, it's actually kind of good. I enjoyed it this time around. And the trickery of, I mean, classic Anakin. Let me just put myself on a ship, blow straight through the enemy lines, and then hop into an escape pod and hope somebody comes help me. Like, that's pretty classic Anakin. And it also reminds me a lot of that episode where he fights Admiral Trench in like the invisible ship, which is also one of my favorite space episodes. And so I think we've talked about this a lot. Space battles can be less interesting on screen, especially in like cartoon form. But honestly, after rewatching this episode, I think it did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think I'm a little lower on the space battle itself of it, but I think that they, like, when I want to watch a great space battle, I'll often just like open up Return of the Jedi or something like that and watch, the one of the trench runs or from New Hope or, something from one of the newer movies that has something like that. Like for me, the space battle, both the space and the ground battle in Rogue One are some of the best, starship fighting things I think we've ever seen.
So good.
And I almost never do that for something from one of the animated shows, but particularly the space battle parts. But I do think that they did a great job of like using the space battle as a method to tell this interesting story about Ahsoka and Anakin, and kind of setting it up that like, I think there's a lot of parallels here and a lot of like, honestly, neither one of these two should be anywhere near command. Like send them on like secret spy missions and don't make them responsible for anyone else. Yeah. But as you said, it's war and they're overstretched and there's just no one else.
Mhm.
So let's move on to the next episode, because clearly this was the one that really hit you hard. Talk about, first of all, your connections with the girl. Who do we ever get her name?
Her name is Numa, and she's actually very important. She's in Rebels as well.
Oh, okay, cool. Say more.
She is actually, she might even be in the Bad Batch. I can't quite remember, but she's a Twi'lek who has that same like bluish coloring, like a bluish green, and she actually wears part of I don't remember if it's Waxer or Boyle, but she wears part of their armor, like their shoulder pad and bicep pads when she fights in the rebellion, which I always thought was really special. And she has the little stuffed animal that she has is painted onto the armor.
That's really cool.
So that's just like a fun little Easter egg. Like she grew up to kick ass. But yeah, so her name is Numa. And I don't know what it was about it. I think something about like the language barrier of it all also was like really interesting to watch. Just kind of seeing them try and work out like, okay, like she just keeps calling us something. Who knows what the fuck that means? But like we're trying to get our job done.
Yeah.
And they almost lose their lives and only survive because they actually listen to the girl. And she finds like tells them about these secret tunnels and then they escape. But I just loved the contrast between Waxer and Boyle. First of all, Waxer, his name is Waxer because he's bald and he waxes his head. And I think that's really funny.
Which you have done a lot more deep dives on the clones. Is there any, and there's some clones who have significantly more hair than others. Is there something about how like the clones have like different, like some have male pattern baldness and others, or is it some of them literally shave their heads?
My understanding is they shave their heads. Like the clones are complete genetic copies, and any difference in their appearance, they've done themselves. Like they will perm their hair. Like any clone with curly hair, that ain't natural. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Except for like Tamura Morrison had like kind of curly hair back in the day. But if we're talking about like clones in the Clone Wars TV show, it's never portrayed as being curly. But yeah, so he definitely shaves his head like a baddie. And I just thought it was so funny. He's so like sweet with her and like, oh, like let's take care of her, you know, like we got to get her to safety. And Boyle's like, she's only gonna slow us down. That fucker bit you. Like I don't understand what you want me to do about this.
To give it the significance of the bite, he calls her biter for the whole, and like it's funny because the first time I watched it, I missed that the bite happened. And so I thought it was just like ankle biter, you know, like a small child is a biter. But no, it's specifically that she bit. And again, that like clone gloves sometimes are really good and sometimes just, you know, a Twi'lek's feral teeth can go right through. So
I will say Twi'leks are carnivorous creatures, so they do have pointy teeth.
That's true.
So that could have something to do with it. But yeah, I just always loved seeing that sort of softer side of the clones because we don't get it a lot. And in my head and all the stories I made up, they are just the most teddy bear cuddly boys, of course. And so like seeing Boyle's kind of what's the word? Whatever. Seeing him work through the initial like discomfort to in the end being okay with her hugging him in front of the boys, like was really special. And it's the end of the episode always almost makes me cry because General Kenobi speaks whatever language it is the Twi'leks speak, and he like converses with them and whatnot. And as they're saying goodbye to Numa, she's waving, she's holding her dad's hand saying Nira, Nira, Nira. And I can't remember, I think it was Boyle asks like, General, like, what is it that she keeps calling us? And it means brother.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just like ugly sobbing because it's, and like just the little bit of recognition or realization maybe on his face of like such a genuine connection was made is just so special and makes it hit so much harder when fast forward 4 seasons, we've got Umbara and all that bullshit that goes down.
Yep.
And General Kenobi's forces are against General Skywalker's forces, and the commander that is killed and reveals we are clones is Waxer.
Oh, I didn't even put that together, but you're right.
And it's so heartbreaking. I don't remember if it's Favs or Rex that finds him and like takes the helmet off, and he's like, we were told you were like Umbarans, like we're all clones, and like one singular tear drips down his face. Ah, that shit guts me because of these episodes.
That hits so hard.
Yeah.
Well, and I think part of why I love this episode is, and granted, I am a Last Jedi defender till my dying day, but one of the things that I think Last Jedi gets attacked for that I think this episode kind of shows is wrong is the famous Rose Tico quote of, "We don't win by fighting what we hate, we win by defending what we love." And I think that's an idea that has been in Star Wars all along. And to me, that's part of what this is about, because it's the idea of, soldiers, we often focus on go kill the enemy. But the reality is they are there to protect the Twi'leks. They are there to rescue. They are there to save a people, not just to kill the people who are oppressing those people.
Yeah.
And so this moment where it's about like, because one of the things that Boyle is worried about is that they're disobeying orders because they're supposed to go back and like be part of the fight.
Yeah, they haven't called back yet.
Right. And I think that like one of the things that really hits me is like, this is this war of like thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of soldiers on each side. I don't think 2 extra guys are going to make the difference, but they're going to make so much difference to this one girl, and that idea of, yeah, you're there to like fight this enemy, but you're there to protect Ryloth and to save Ryloth. And that means the individual people. It means every single person. There's a great quote in Judaism, it's a spiritual idea of it's called Tikkun Olam. To save one person is to save the entire world, and that to me is really what comes through in this. It's that idea of like, this is the most important thing they can do, and they have to realize that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That I feel like that definitely applies in this situation, and also that's something that I feel Wat Tambor is specifically using against the Republic in this entire episode arc. He's consistently putting the Twi'leks out front and putting them in a place of danger to defend the droids.
Yeah.
And we see the Republic forces have to get creative to work around it.
Yeah.
And I mean, in this episode, the only reason they're able to work around it and get those people out of there safely is because Numa showed Waxer and Boyle these underground tunnels that they're able to use to sneak the prisoners out.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Wat Tambor for a minute, because I feel like they must have done a Henry Cavill level, like removing his mustache, because he is mustache twirling, like the most mustache twirling of villains we've ever seen. He's constantly throwing other droids under the bus, and I'll say something about the violence towards droids in a minute. And there's kind of this conflict going on between him and the droid general, and we get introduced. I think this is the first time we see them, but I'm not sure. But that there's kind of droids who are sort of like droid analysts, and that they are supposed to be incredibly good at battle because they can do all the math and analyze all the possibilities. And their voice is kind of very weirdly mechanical in a have you seen Battlestar Galactica, especially the original Battlestar Galactica?
I have not.
So I would not expect you to at all. It's a fun show from the 70s. It's very much a show from the 70s. The newer show is really good, except the last couple seasons. But putting all that aside, the robots, the Cylons spoke in this very metallic voice that is exactly how this guy speaks. And so I was like, that's a cool little throwback for the older Star Wars fans, sci-fi fans. But yeah, it's just kind of this interesting idea of like, they are just going to be purely mechanical and purpose driven and calculate the best odds for everything. And Wat Tambor is kind of out for himself. And that includes everything from, not caring about what happens to the others to, at the end, he doesn't evacuate when everyone is supposed to, because he just wants to collect all the treasure and all the gold and like enrich himself as well as win this fight. And in the end, he comes really close to getting himself killed, except the Republic stopped because the droids are just going to like wipe out the capital city of Ryloth. And of course the Republic stops them from doing that. What would you kind of take on his what we got of his story?
Wat Tambor?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been an interesting character to me because I don't want to be wrong, but I want to say this is like one of the only times we see him in the Clone Wars, if not the only time, until season 7 came out, and then he was part of. Oh, I lied. Never mind. That's Admiral Trench. He's not heavily involved in the show, but he was a bad guy in a really difficult part of the Clone Wars game that came out. Not the Lego one, but the other one. And I hated that fucker. You had to like use the Force to take giant fuel cells and try to like, explode them on him. But if you did it wrong, then he wouldn't explode. It was always so frustrating. And so that just like built into my rage against this man, or being, I would say, perhaps.
Yeah, I was kind of interested in him. He appears in Revenge of the Sith as one of the other members of the Separatist Council. And if people don't remember who he is, he's the one who's very kind of robotic-like, and he clearly speaks through some kind of mechanical translator that even though his people are literally the ones that build and design the droids, like he's
Geckoing.
Yeah, and he's head of the Techno Union. So clearly he's very like technical, but like he has to tune his own voice box like a radio. Which I don't understand for the high techness, but putting that aside, it seemed like an interesting design, and so I was kind of bummed that like, well, but I guess he doesn't get killed off in this; he gets captured, so maybe he gets to escape later or something. I don't know, but
yeah, Go
ahead.
I just double checked Wikipedia. Other than these 3 episodes, he's only seen in flashbacks or on like hollow images.
Yeah.
Until Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So, fair enough.
But yeah, I always found Wat Tambor very interesting. And I mean, any alien that needs like some sort of an environment suit to be outside of their natural planet is very interesting to me. But yeah, no, he's so fucking greedy. Like this guy, it very much reminds me of like the Neimoidians and the banking clan.
Yep.
How like they ally with the Separatists because they want to get rich, which tale as old as time when it comes to war, right?
Right.
But yeah, like that's the thing that really gets him in the end is he's like, and it's the only reason Mace Windu is able to sneak into the capital is because he's constantly trying to bring in shipments of treasure to steal off of Ryloth.
Right.
And it's something Cham says in the 3rd episode. He says, it's not enough for you to like murder and enslave our people. You need to rob us too. Like these Separatists are vile and disgusting.
Yeah, it's rough.
And I really liked when they did capture Wat Tambor, and he says, like, what are the conditions of your what do you call it? Surrender. What are the conditions of the surrender? And Cham just says unconditional.
Yeah.
And Wat Tambor just goes, I agree.
Well, and it's funny too because earlier we'd had a similar moment with Mace where he looks to Mace and is like, surely we can come to some sort of compromise, and Mace is like, no, there will be no compromise.
Yeah.
Which is only interesting because the like fortune cookie wisdom that appears at the beginning of every episode was like the importance of compromise. So I was just like, that's an interesting mismatch here. And by the way,
but the compromise they want to talk about is between the Twi'leks.
Yes,
not Wat Tambor.
Exactly. And by the way, for anyone surprised I call it fortune cookie wisdom, if you go back and listen to those original episodes that I did with Riki and Sarah, Riki had made the comment of comparing these messages to what you get in fortune cookies, and he actually would play a game with us where he would take a couple of statements that were from the beginnings of Clone Wars episodes, and also a couple of things printed in fortune cookies, and see if we could guess which was which. And we got him about 60% right. Like 40% of the time, we couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, that's funny. And also, like, to listeners, those episodes are what got me hooked on this podcast. Like, the only reason I'm on this podcast now is because I loved what Riki and Sarah were saying, and I sent Matthew an email. So definitely check those episodes out, especially for that little that little cookie
Yeah.
cookie thing.
It was a fun game. It was a fun game. I'll try not to be
Very
deeply
fun.
insulted that it was just those two, but I totally understand what you're saying.
What? Sorry. Okay.
No, I'm
No. I
teasing
mean,
you. I'm teasing you. I'm
of
teasing
course
you.
you as well, but like I'm just trying to highlight the people that aren't currently speaking.
No, exactly. It's so important. And just for those who know, Sarah has been like doing a lot of school stuff, and that's why she's not been on more. But we're definitely hoping to get her back. And Ricky, of course, he's going to come back from time to time, and you can hear him on the Superhero Ethics podcast fairly regularly.
Hey.
So all that's good stuff. Any other things you want to say about this before we wrap up? Like, I think these are probably not. These are sometimes being shorter episodes because there's not too much to say about these, but we've had a lot to say about them already. I don't think too many people are going to complain. Her episodes are a little shorter. But any of the last comments you want to make about these three?
I want to say Cham Syndulla was right.
Yep.
In these episodes, he talks about not trusting Senator Frita because he will sell their planet out for like political power.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Mace Windu kind of talks them into a compromise, as we've mentioned, and they decide, you know, Cham's like, I won't vie for power, I just want freedom. And
Yeah.
Senator Ta is like, we'll get the Republic out of here ASAP, Rocky, because that was Cham's one kind of condition, is that I don't want this to go from a separatist occupation to a Republic occupation. That's not freedom.
Yeah.
That's a switch of power. And in I can't remember if it's in Rebels, but in the Bad Batch, we see Senator Frita as really a shitty person because he is allying with the Empire and kind of just rolling on his belly for them and letting them do what they want to the planet. And those are the episodes where we get to meet little Hera and she becomes friends with Omega, and it's so cute. But yeah, it's just interesting how much like foreshadowing there was for Frita. Because I remember as seeing him as a kid, not like hating him. But then when I watched Bad Batch, I was like, what? Like, why do these people hate on him? Like, I thought he was like the funny guy. And then I'm going back and rewatching and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
No, he's a patsy. Like
and I underline all of that. And I also think it just sets up what becomes, I think, a really important theme throughout these shows, which is that like the Republic and the Separatists are going to be fighting in these worlds, and the Separatists are not going to like have delusions that they're like doing it for the good of people. But a lot of times the Republic is like, no, we are here to rescue you, you poor people. Of course you want to be part of the Republic. And there's a number of episodes where the people on that planet are like, no, you're bringing your war to us. We don't want to be any part of either of you.
yeah.
And we get a number of different responses like this. And there's some who are like Cham, who are like, no, we're going to fight for our freedom, not to be one of the two factions. We get people like the Scottish Lemurs who are just like, we want peace and we don't want to fight in any side of the war.
Which I will say that was like my backup for episodes to choose, were the Jedi Crash and Defenders of Peace episodes that happen with the Lerman people.
Yep. And don't worry, we will be talking about them because they're some of my favorites as well.
Yay!
And yeah, because it's and then also I know later like they go to an ice planet where there's this like race of like kind of like Wookiee-like beings that are very sentient.
Tall.
Say again?
The Tall.
The Tall, thank you. And they also want no part of the fight. And you know, you know, I think run all the way back to A New Hope, there's always been political illusions in Star Wars, and the idea of like two great powers fighting these wars against each other in theory on behalf of this third population that's kind of stuck in the middle, like that's a tale as old as time, you know. And Vietnam is maybe the first example of it, but it's been happening in Afghanistan for more than 2 centuries. It's happening today in Syria and all these places. Like, you know, I just really like them paying attention to that, of it's not just people who are like, oh yay the Republic, or oh yay the Separatists. And some it's just these places being devastated by the war on both sides. And that's something that Star Wars is going to come back to again and again. And I really like how they're doing it.
Yeah. A few things I want to mention about this last episode. First of all, Commander Pons is a baddie. That is Mace's commander, and I'm in love with him. Next. Second of all, those two clones, I wish I caught their names, but I didn't. But the two clones that went with Mace Windu to infiltrate the capital city of Lassu and get the like hollow bridge up. Those motherfuckers went crazy. Like, first of all, they went up there and they got control of the bridge and they turned it up. And then 2 commando droids came out of nowhere. And these motherfuckers, like when I was a kid, there was nothing scarier than the whir of a commando droid flipping around. Like because they had like knives and shit. And they were so scary. And they could just beat the shit out of clones. And not only do these clones take out these droids, but one of them literally just sucker punches him.
Yeah.
Just punches this commando droid out. And I think nothing is funnier than clones fist fighting droids. It's one of my favorite things. So I really enjoyed that. Just little moment of badassery. And then something that I'm going to bring it up, even though I'm sure you really hated it, Matthew. But that one, when the droids find like wreckage of another droid that's been killed by the freedom fighters, they're like, well, he's one of the older models like programmed by a central computer. Not us. We're independent thinkers. And then it's just Roger. And
we all think independently. We all think independently. Yeah.
No, exactly. I was like, at least they're like playing in their own face and like making fun of themselves.
I didn't hate that moment as much as I might have thought. There might have been a slight chuckle chucked.
That's funny.
I will say the bonus content today is going to be about the value of droid lives. We will be getting into that a bit, but that's what we can say for the bonus for the members, which by the way, you can become a member. $5 a month. How much a year?
$55
a year. You get a discount there. If you sign up for a year, you get bonus episodes of this podcast, of our other podcasts, Superhero Ethics. You get to support the podcast. You get entire free member episodes, and you get to help us keep the lights on. So all good things.
All amazing things.
Help us get Erin t-shirts from bands from her own generation. It's a possible thing. I like to support a Slipknot, but like, let's help update the music. Or even better, let's buy Erin a Slipknot CD. So
vinyl, can we? Because I got a new record stand for my record player.
Oh my God. I have been out pretentious, everyone. It's happened. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Okay.
Pretentious.
Moving on.
Final thing I'll mention for these episodes is in the first episode, Storm over Ryloth. I thought it was really sweet. Ahsoka's clone squadron that all gets demolished. They refer to her as Skipper.
Oh yeah, I caught that.
And I thought that was really cute. I don't exactly understand if there's a specific significance to it, but I just thought it was really sweet that they called her Skipper.
I mean, I think it's like Skipper as in like captain, you know. I don't think it's a reference to Barbie's little sister. I don't see how that's unfortunately the first thing that came to mind, but no, I think it's just like, hey Skipper, hey captain, things like that. Because I think that her rank is commander, not captain. So
correct.
Yeah, I don't get it, but there we go. All right, well, fans, what about you? What do you think of these episodes? Next week we will be doing let me look up which exactly they were. Hold on a second.
Are we doing Alex's next week?
Yeah, do you have them written down in front of you?
I know we're doing Layer of Grievous. But no, I don't have all 3 in front of me.
All right, give me 1 second to look it up.
Okay, I got it. Alex chose Rookies, Layer of Grievous, and Trespass.
Yes, so those are really fun
episodes.
We get to talk about dead clone. We get to talk about dead Jedi.
If y'all could see the face of horror when Matthew happily said, "We get to talk about dead clones."
No, it's Padawans. Padawans are dying because they're dumb.
Freshly Jedi Knight, actually.
Freshly Jedi Knight, but still a Padawan. Like
basically a Padawan.
My boy's a Padawan here, and he's yeah. Anyway, night falls on the new Jedi Knight. And we're gonna talk about fish people and all sorts of fun things like that. But now we're gonna move into the bonus content. Again, become a member. Everything's in the show notes. You can buy a lightsaber. Everything's in the show notes. You could get a subscription to Audible, and you could listen to books on tape the way we do, except they're not really books on tape. They're books on digital. Clearly, Erin here would prefer books on vinyl, but we don't have that. We just have Audible, which lets you take the book anywhere you want to go with you. Great for plane rides, all that sort of thing. I'm going to shut up now and stop trying to sell you things and just move us into the bonus content. So for everybody else, thank you so much. Live long and prosper.
That's all. Ryloth,
but Ryloth, don't stay classy.
Thanks. I forgot what he says. I won't let you down. I hope.
All right, welcome back, members. So I'm going to pose this question to you. And especially, now let me think about how to phrase this. So let me ask you this. You watched these episodes, especially a lot as a kid growing up. What did you think of the droids? Because the droids they die a lot in these episodes, and it's always presented as humorous. Like there's a lot of like, one droid turning on another, and the droid goes, "Oh no," or like, a droid gets eaten by a big beast and says, "Not my motivator." It turns out not to get eaten, but still, it's pretty horrific for that droid. And then like droids fall down because the bridge is destroyed. Like, what was your take on the suffering of the droids in these episodes?
So that's the thing. Like growing up, watching these, like the droids are very purposefully, I think, made to be like something you don't have empathy for.
Right.
And something you're not going to feel bad for because they're dumb and they're just a machine and bada. So that's never really been something I thought about until I started listening to your podcast and heard you guys cover the episodes in maybe like season 4 or 5 where it follows that little tiny commander and a bunch of droids around. Including like QT.
Yeah. He's such a cutie.
Such a cutie. But it's funny. It's like I have sympathy and empathy for like certain types of droids, but not a fucking battle droid.
Yeah.
I don't really care about them. And maybe it's because of like part of like what happens in a Phantom Menace, They take out the command ship, all the droids shut down.
Yeah.
They no longer have any sentience or life or anything within them because they were just programmed by computer. And so why would you feel empathy for something that just has nothing? It's just a machine. But as the series of Clone Wars goes on and you get to see these more... See, this is where it just like is a dichotomy that doesn't make sense because I'm like, fuck a battle droid. But if C-3PO gets like tortured, I'm like, no, my boy.
Right.
And it's just so interesting how like it's almost like the more humanoid the droid, the more you can care for it. But also I have really big feelings about R2-D2 and really big negative feelings about Goldie. Yeah. So clearly Astromechs can also draw opinions and feelings.
Well, and it's funny, not to cross-pollinate, not to cross sci-fi ventures, not to like cross into a totally different world of science fiction, science fantasy kind of stuff. But in Star Trek, they do a whole episode about Data, who is an android who looks so much like a human being. And it's in the episode The Measure of a Man, and it's literally about like, is he a man or is he a machine? And at one point, like someone says, like, well, wait a minute, isn't part of why we think about him the way we do because he looks so human? Would we feel like this if he was a box on wheels? And my response is always like, yes, we would, because R2-D2 was a box on wheels, quite literally, or a dome on wheels, and yet we love him to death. And yeah, like I think there's nothing wrong with the way we watch the show, because I think the show is telling us to do that.
Yeah.
And I do think it's very strategic in that if you're going to tell a show about warfare for kids that doesn't leave them all fundamentally psychologically scarred, although the show does that, but in later ways, you have to remove any empathy from the people who are being killed so dramatically. Yeah. And making them droids is a way to do that. I think then it opens the question of, should you tell stories that make war palatable for small children? That's a whole other question. Because I kind of think maybe not, but also I love this show, And yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting that you bring up the role of C-3PO, because I'll admit this is an issue I had not thought about at all until another previous hosts of Superhero Ethics, Jacob Malichich, brought up this question of that that droids are treated quite badly. And one of his handles, I think, is droids are people too. And he was talking about how in the last movie, Rise of Skywalker, we're pretty casual about wiping out C-3PO's memory and basic personality death, like killing him as a person. It doesn't happen, as it turns out, but his reactions to it are presented kind of comedically,
Mm-hmm.
and his objections to it are basically just completely overwritten and overrun. So yeah, I think that there is I love Star Wars. I think Star Wars does some great, interesting ethical things. I think the question of is AI real life, and does it have sentience and thus any of the rights of sentience? They kind of just present it when they want to present it, when it's helpful to present it. The rest of the time, it's just a fun joke, and just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, definitely. I appreciate your insight because it's a complicated thing. And then, like you mentioned, Star Trek, like in other sci-fi, then you get into like androids, cyborgs, people that are like part man, part machine. Okay, well, do
Right.
they have the same amount of rights? Do they have less rights? Do they have more rights? Like, what does this mean? And I feel like it's something like characters, partial machine or full machine characters are so easy to throw into a series. And like you said, I think it's really easy to use some of their emotions and fears as like comedic relief because it's like,
Right.
well, they're just a droid. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think it's something very interesting that I hope doesn't really become a real world problem. I'd really love to not live in a life with like completely sentient and separate like AI droids. That makes me really uncomfortable. And then we'd have some really horrifying like political and ethical discussions about it. And I really hope we don't get there, to be honest with you. But it is really interesting and I think kind of important to address it when it comes to like fiction.
Yeah.
Because we should address like, why do I not feel empathy for this kind of group or this group of people or this type of animal kind of a thing?
Yeah. Well, and Riki, who I know was such an important part of you wanting to be on this podcast, this is an issue that, like you said about my insight, but really this is me just stealing insights from Riki and Jacob. One of the things I really appreciate that Riki brought is he would often talk about how, and I think a lot of science fiction does this, it's really interesting to watch, the more that a show wants you to hate a group and not have empathy for them being killed, the more they'll make them look non-human. But often part of what that means is darkening their skin. It doesn't do this. But like think about like the Chitauri in Avengers or other things like that. And we've certainly talked about that with like the making the Emodians very Japanese or which is darkening their skin, but certainly making them racialized, things like that. So
I mean the
yeah.
Umbarans.
Oh yeah, definitely that. Which is one of the only like sentient non-robotic groups they fight, or the Geonosians, who are quite literally like one of the furthest things from human. They're insectoid.
They're bugs.
Yeah.
And the clones and Jedi love to roast them about it and just really emphasize how little they matter because they're bugs.
Yeah. Until they want us them to have them matter when there's a genocide on their planet and we meet like one or two that are kind of cute, and so Anakin wants to help. Like it's just and Star Wars is not alone.
Ezra in Rebels, right?
Oh, you're right. It's Ezra. Okay, that's in Rebels, not in Clone Wars. You're right. Yeah.
I was like, Anakin would never like those dirty bugs. My guy has prejudice to the core. Like,
that's true. All right. Well, this has been awesome. As always, Erin, thank you so much. To our listeners, to our members, thank you so much. You're what keeps the lights on.
Thank you. We love you.
Live long and prosper.
First rule of war, follow and obey orders.
Yes, ma'am.
Bullshit.